My name is Avery. I'm 24 years old. What you're about to hear is a story that will make your skin crawl and your heart ache. The house that looked perfect from the outside, the white walls, the manicured lawn, the quiet street, was a prison. And the woman who was supposed to love me, my mother, Vanessa, was the warden of that prison. If you want to hear stories like this, stories of betrayal, cruelty, and revenges, subscribe to the channel now, so you get daily videos and never miss a moment of the truth. I grew up in San Francisco, in a house where fear was the air I breathed. Vanessa didn't just dislike me, she seemed to exist only to make me feel small, worthless, and invisible. Even at 8 years old, I learned that smiling was dangerous. Laughter was suspicious. Tears were punishable. By the time I was 12, I realized nothing I did would ever earn her approval. Straight A's, trophies, awards from competitions, she dismissed them all. "That's cute," she would say, "but don't expect me to be impressed." I stopped sharing anything with her. I stopped dreaming out loud. I hid my talents, my joy, my very self. My father, Michael, tried to be a shield. Little notes on my pillow, chocolates, soft words like, "I'm proud of you." But even he could not stand up to her. And when he died suddenly, my world collapsed completely. Vanessa's cruelty escalated. She controlled my room, my belongings, my meals, even my schedule. Then she decided the basement would be my new home. "It's your space," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The basement was freezing, damp, darker, coffin disguised as a room. A single sliver of light came from a tiny window. I clung to it like a lifeline, whispering, "Maybe if I stay quiet, maybe she'll see me." But she never did. The abuse was relentless. Vanessa didn't just yell. She tormented me psychologically. She made me scrub floors for hours on end, then yelled that I had missed a spot. She took my allowance, shredded my artwork, threw away my journals. One time, she forced me to stand in front of a mirror for 2 hours, repeating her words, "You are nothing. You will never be enough." She would watch my face, twist with fear, and relish it. Some nights she would lock me in the basement without food, saying I was being punished for thinking too much of myself. Other nights she would force me to eat spoiled leftovers while laughing, saying, "You'll learn how worthless you are." She humiliated me in ways no child should ever imagine. Every word, every glance, every action was a calculated strike against my soul. There were days she made me wear clothes she chose, tearfully pretending to be proud while she whispered insults into my ears. "No one will ever want you. You're pathetic. You'll never be beautiful, smart, or strong." And when I tried to hide my tears, she would slap my face or pull me by my hair, reminding me that showing weakness was forbidden. I started documenting everything. Every insult, every cruel act, every time she stole a piece of my childhood, I wrote down. I recorded her voice. I kept small notes in hidden corners of the basement. Every bit of pain was saved, cataloged, and stored inside me, not just for memory, but as a plan, a weapon I could one day use. By 16, I had learned to endure horrors no teenager should ever face. I could smile while my insides ached. I could laugh while my hands shook. I could obey while secretly plotting how to survive. I became quiet, almost invisible, while my mind worked constantly. Every scream I held back, every tear I swallowed, every insult I endured was fuel. Some nights, I would lie awake listening to her in the house above, feeling the rage and the fear mix inside me. The air in that basement was thick with despair, yet it became a forge. The storm my mother thought had destroyed me was shaping me into someone stronger, someone who could withstand unimaginable cruelty and keep planning, keep dreaming. Even as she tormented me, she had no idea that I was learning. I memorized every routine, every temper, every subtle signal of her moods. I learned when to hide, when to speak, when to survive. Every humiliation she inflicted only made me sharper, more aware, more determined. The girl who had once screamed and cried in the basement was gone. In her place was someone patient, quietly dangerous, waiting for a moment I could control. And the most terrifying part for her, she had no idea. She still believed she controlled me. She still believed I was weak, small, obedient. But I was watching, I was learning, and in that quiet, calculated way, I was becoming unstoppable. Life in that basement became a slow, suffocating nightmare. Days blended into nights, and nights into endless hours of fear. Vanessa didn't just control my environment, she controlled my mind. She would call me to the kitchen and demand I recount everything I had done that day. Every thought, every word, every mistake. If I faltered, even slightly, she would strike me, not always physically. Sometimes, psychologically, forcing me to kneel while she berated me, her voice slicing through my very sense of self. Some mornings, I would wake up to find my possessions destroyed. My journals, where I had poured my soul, ripped and scattered across the damp floor. My drawings, painstakingly done, shredded. Once, she forced me to eat my own artwork, telling me, "This is what worthless things deserve." I had never felt more humiliated in my life. Every bite I swallowed felt like swallowing my own dignity. She invented new ways to break me. Sometimes she would lock me in the basement with no light, whispering threats from the stairs above. "This is your life now," she would say, "you belong here. You will never be anything." Other times, she would mock me in front of her friends, forcing me to smile while they laughed at my trembling hands and reddened eyes. She would call me a liar, a cheat, a disgusting failure, and I was powerless to defend myself. I remember one evening vividly. I had tried to sneak into the kitchen for water, and she caught me. Instead of just punishing me, she forced me to kneel on the cold tile floor while she poured ice water over my head. Every hair soaked, every drop of warmth gone from my body, she stood over me and whispered, "You're pathetic, you're nothing. Even this basement is too good for you." My teeth chattered, my skin burned, and yet I didn't scream. I had learned screaming did nothing. Only patience, only endurance, would keep me alive. At school, I pretended nothing was wrong. I smiled, I laughed, I did my work. No one could see the bruises in my soul. Inside, however, I was cataloging everything. Every insult, every humiliation, every calculated act of cruelty Vanessa inflicted. I recorded it, memorized it, and let it fuel something dark and determined in me. I became quiet, invisible, and yet, I was sharpening myself with every day I survived. She attacked my mind in subtler ways too. She would tell me my friends hated me, that teachers thought I was stupid, that everyone was secretly laughing at me. Even the thought of being alone in the world terrified me, but it also pushed me deeper into I realized that survival meant hiding all weakness, keeping all anger and plans buried beneath a smiling face, while I prepared for the day when I would finally claim control. I remember the nights best. The basement was dark, the single window letting in a thin line of moonlight, and I would sit on the cold floor, knees to my chest, listening to her footsteps above. Sometimes she would scream at herself, venting frustrations, never noticing me. And I would whisper to myself, one day, all of this will come back to her. That thought, tiny and fragile at first, grew into a steady flame. By the time I turned 16, I had learned the cruelest lesson of all. the human mind is both fragile and infinitely strong. My body had endured punishments I cannot even describe without shivering. My heart had been shattered into pieces and ground under her words. Yet inside me, a new me was forming. One who would no longer be a victim. One who would endure the unimaginable, and yet remain calculating, patient, and ready. Every time Vanessa believed she had broken me, she was wrong. Every humiliation, every cold insult, every act of cruelty became fuel. She didn't realize that by trying to destroy me, she had created a girl who could survive anything and who was quietly learning how to return the pain tenfold. I had become a ghost in my own home, invisible and silent, while my mind was alive, awake, plotting, and calculating. I no longer dreamed of escaping the basement physically. I dreamed of justice, of revenge, of reclaiming my life in a way she could never undo. By the time I turned 18, the Avery who had once cried endlessly on the basement floor had vanished. In her place was a girl who could endure unspeakable cruelty, still breathe, still plan, still dream. Vanessa thought she had one. But she had no idea that every insult, every lie, every act of cruelty had only forged me into someone far stronger than she could ever imagine. The basement had become my entire world, a place where light barely reached, and hope felt like a distant memory. Vanessa didn't just punish me anymore, she broke me down methodically, emotionally, mentally, until I started questioning every thought I had about myself. She invented new forms of cruelty daily, testing the limits of what a person could endure. Sometimes, she would call me into the living room and force me to watch as she humiliated me in front of her friends. She'd make me recite embarrassing truths about myself, things I never wanted anyone to know. While she laughed, encouraging everyone to mock me. "This is who she is," she would say. Worthless and pathetic. My stomach would twist, my face would burn, and yet I could not look away. The humiliation was a trap, a constant reminder that I was powerless. She began taking my food. Some days, she would give me barely enough to eat, claiming it was punishment for being ungrateful. Other days, she would force me to eat meals that were spoiled or disgusting, laughing as I gagged. Once, she made me eat a sandwich covered in mold, telling me, "This is what you deserve for thinking you're better than me." I wanted to scream, to run, to fight, but I knew doing so would only make things worse. Vanessa's psychological games were relentless. She would spread lies about me to my school friends, telling them I had stolen, cheated, or lied. She even convinced some teachers to doubt me, leaving me isolated, terrified, and completely dependent on her approval as she refused to give it. Every attempt to defend myself was met with fury. "You think anyone will help you? No one cares about a worthless girl like you," she spat one night. She took my clothing, my shoes, my personal items, and destroyed them without reason. My journals, the only place I could write my thoughts, were torn and shredded. My art, my sketches, painstakingly created, were ripped apart while she whispered, "Trash belongs with trash." The physical pain was minimal compared to the weight of her words. The invisible bruises that marked my mind. She would manipulate my sense of reality, telling me I had imagined things, that I was lying, that I was ungrateful. If I cried, she would twist it against me, saying I was weak, pathetic, unworthy. "No one will ever love you," she whispered repeatedly, "because even I have to live with you." I started to believe it. Some nights, she would lock me in complete darkness for hours, telling me to think about my failures. The silence was deafening, my heart pounding in fear, imagining she might never return. Other nights, she forced me to stand for hours on end, repeating insults after her. "You are nothing. You are nothing." You will never be enough. The repetition drilled into my mind, crushing my sense of self. The cold of the basement seeped into my bones. I would wrap myself in thin blankets and shiver. But the worst was not the cold, it was the isolation. I had no one to turn to. My friends, my teachers, everyone had been convinced I was a liar, a failure, a broken girl. The only person I had in my corner was my own growing determination to survive. I started documenting every cruel act, every insult, every punishment, every moment she made me feel smally, wrote it down in secret, memorized it, and used it to plan, to fuel my survival instinct. The basement, though a prison, became my forge. Every hour I endured made me sharper, stronger, more capable of weathering unimaginable cruelty. I learned how to mask my fear, how to smile even when my stomach ached, how to appear obedient while mentally plotting my own path forward. I became invisible in plain sight, quiet, patient, and alert. Each cruel word she spoke, each humiliation, each act of control became a weapon I stored for later, a weapon against her and the injustice I had endured. Even at 16, the Avery who once sobbed on the cold basement floor was gone. In her place was someone who could survive anything, endure anything, and remain calculating, patient, and aware. Every harsh word, every violent glance, every act of domination had forged me into someone unrecognizable to the mother who believed she had broken me. Vanessa had no idea that I was observing, learning, and preparing. She thought her control was absolute. She thought I was still small, weak, and obedient. But I was quietly becoming unstoppable. The basement, the darkness, the endless cruelty, all of it was shaping me into a force she could never contain. Every insult, every act of torment, every attempt to destroy me was creating a version of me, stronger, colder, and sharper than she could ever imagine. The basement had become a world of shadows and whispered fears. By now, I had memorized every creak of the stairs, every echo of her footsteps, every shift of her gaze when she thought I wasn't watching. Vanessa's cruelty had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. As though she had discovered new ways to torment a person daily. She began targeting my mind in ways that left invisible scars deeper than any bruise. She would force me to question reality itself. "You're imagining things," she would hiss when I protested her punishments. "No one likes you. Everyone is lying about caring for you. You are alone." She would force me to write confession letters for sins I hadn't committed, then laugh as she read them aloud to the empty room, the basement echoing my shame. Food became another weapon. Some days, she would deny me meals entirely. On other days, she would present the nastiest scraps, forcing me to eat until I gagged. Once, she smeared a piece of moldy bread with spoiled peanut butter and shoved it into my mouth. I had never felt such humiliation, eating filth while she stood above me, smiling. "This is what worthless people like you deserve," she said, her words like knives pressing into my chest. Sleep was another form of torture. She would wake me at random hours in the night, forcing me to clean the entire house while barefoot on cold tile. If I faltered, she would strike me across the face or make me stand in place for hours while repeating her mantra of cruelty. "You are nothing. You will never be enough." Hours would pass, each second a reminder that I had no control, no escape. School was no refuge. Vanessa had told lies about me, painting me as a liar, a thief, a manipulative child. Some friends stopped speaking to me, teachers doubted my honesty. And I learned to sit in classrooms pretending to be normal while feeling invisible, abandoned, and completely exposed. Every glance felt like judgment, every whispered comment a potential trap. She attacked my self-image relentlessly. She forced me to wear clothes I despised, mocked my weight, laughed at my expressions. One day, she shaved my hair off in front of the mirror, saying, "Even this is too nice for someone like you." I stared at my reflection, unrecognizably humiliated, angry, and terrified all at once. I hated the reflection, yet I couldn't fight back. I learned to swallow the anger, to hide the tears, to exist as she demanded. The basement floor became my confessional. I would whisper to myself, counting each cruel word, each act of domination. My body shook from cold, from hunger, from fear, but my mind began to sharpen. Every insult, every act of violence, every humiliation Vanessa inflicted became part of my silent arsenal. I began imagining what life would look like when I had power, when I could take back control. Vanessa's cruelty reached new heights with manipulation. She would sometimes convince me that I had done something terrible, even when I hadn't. "You ruined everything," she would say. Tears fake on her cheeks, "because you are selfish and worthless." I would cry silently, shaking, convinced for a moment that she was right. And yet, with every fake tear, every false accusation, my mind grew stronger. I learned the difference between her lies and my reality, between her fear tactics and my survival instincts. By 15, I had learned to endure punishment, hunger, humiliation, and isolation simultaneously. I became a master at hiding pain. I smiled, nodded, obeyed, but every step, every moment of endurance, was forging something new inside me. I was learning patience, calculation, and endurance in a way no other teenager ever had to. I had become invisible, silent, and observant. I began to secretly record every detail, her voice, her words, her punishments. I catalogued every humiliation, every stolen possession, every act of psychological warfare. Every act that should have destroyed me, instead, created a blueprint for survival and, deep down, for revenge. I realized that every tear I had swallowed, every scream I had held back, every night spent shivering alone in darkness, was shaping me into someone Vanessa could never control. By 16, I had transformed. The girl who had once screamed, cried, and trembled on the basement floor no longer existed. In her place was a girl who could survive anything, endure anything, and still think, plan, and wait. She believed I was broken, small, obedient. The basement was no longer just a room, it had become a battlefield where every second tested my endurance. Vanessa's cruelty had grown more inventive, more deliberate. She didn't only punish me physically or verbally anymore. She attacked my very sense of self, reshaping my mind with fear, shame, and humiliation that seemed endless. She would force me to kneel on the cold floor for hours while she paced above, whispering threats that cut deeper than any slap. "You are nothing," she said one morning, her words sharp as knives, "and you will never be anything. Even your own existence disgusts me." I would curl up, teeth chattering, trying to make myself as small as possible, praying for the torture to end. It never did. Some days, she withheld food for long hours, making me watch her eat lavish meals above, while I sat alone in the darkness. Other days, she forced me to eat the most repulsive things imaginable, spoiled leftovers. raw ingredients, combinations meant to disgust. Once, she shoved a moldy piece of bread, smeared with rancid butter, into my mouth, telling me, "This is what worthless people deserve." I gagged, my throat burning, my stomach revolting. And she stood above me, grinning, relishing every second of my suffering. Vanessa didn't just attack me physically or mentally, she destroyed every trace of my identity. She tore my journals, burned my drawings, and confiscated anything that gave me comfort. Once, she dumped a box of my personal belongings in the yard and set fire to it, telling me, "Your dreams are garbage." They always were. I remember standing outside in the cold, watching flames consume my past, my creativity, my solace, and feeling a mix of anger, despair, and helplessness that nearly broke me entirely. At school, she continued her attacks in more subtle ways. She spread rumors that I was a liar, manipulative, untrustworthy. Friends stopped speaking to me, teachers questioned my honesty, and every day became a lonely battlefield. I smiled, laughed, and pretended to be normal in class, hiding the fear and shame that weighed me down like a stone. My mind became a machine, calculating every step I took, every word I said, every reaction I showed, all to survive. Her psychological games became more twisted. She would sometimes tell me I had done terrible things that I had no memory of committing, convincing me I was inherently bad. "You ruined everything again," she whispered one night, her eyes cold, "because you are selfish and worthless. No one could ever care about you, not even me." I cried in silence, heart aching, wishing for comfort, wishing someone would see the pain in me, but there was no one. Only the darkness of the basement, the endless terror, and her calculated cruelty. Vanessa began taking my self-worth even further. She would mock my appearance relentlessly. She called me ugly, weak, and disgusting. She cut my hair multiple times without permission, leaving me embarrassed and humiliated. Once, she forced me to stand in front of a mirror and compare myself to every ideal image she had ever admired, telling me I fell short in every way. The humiliation burned deeper than any slap, and yet I survived it. Some nights, she would leave me alone in complete darkness, telling me to think about everything you've done wrong. I would sit on the cold floor, trembling, listening to the sounds above the creak of stairs, the hum of the refrigerator, her laughter, and let the fear wash over me. But at the same time, a quiet, stubborn flame began to burn inside me. Every insult, every act of humiliation, every deprivation was fueling something deeper, a determination to survive and, eventually, to take control. By 16, I had endured horrors that no teenager should ever face. I had learned to mask my pain perfectly. I smiled when I had to, nodded when I had to, obeyed when I had to, all while secretly planning, secretly observing, silently waiting. I had become invisible in plain sight, a ghost of the girl Vanessa thought she had destroyed. Every cruel act she inflicted, every psychological game she played, only strengthened me. Each punishment, each insult, each shred of humiliation became a brick in the foundation of my resolve. I knew that every tear I swallowed, every scream I held back, every night spent shivering in darkness, was shaping me into someone she could never break completely. I began to dream again, not of freedom from the basement, but of justice. Of reclaiming my life from someone who had made it a living nightmare. The Avery who had once trembled in fear was gone. In her place was someone who could survive unimaginable cruelty, remain patient, and observe every detail, waiting for the day when she would realize that every act of torment had only forged me into a force far stronger than she had ever imagined. The basement had become more than just a room. It had become my prison, my world, and the center of every nightmare Vanessa could invent. By now, her cruelty had evolved into something I had never thought possible. It wasn't just about yelling or punishment anymore. She seemed to take pleasure in erasing every part of me that might be human, kind, or free. She began controlling my thoughts, my memories, my perception of reality. "You are crazy," she said one morning, pacing above me while I scrubbed the floor. "You think you matter, but you are nothing. You make mistakes because you are defective. Everyone around you hates you, and they are just pretending to care." Her voice was soft but sharp, a blade cutting into my mind. I started to doubt myself, my memory, even my own feelings. Sleep became another form of torment. Some nights, she wouldn't let me lie down. I would pace the basement endlessly, exhausted but too afraid to rest, knowing that even a second of sleep could result in punishment if I failed to follow her arbitrary rules. Other nights, she would wake me repeatedly, forcing me to perform chores in the dark, standing barefoot on the cold tiles while she watched from above, whispering threats that left me shaking uncontrollably. Food was a weapon in her hands. She would deny me meals for entire days, or give me spoiled, disgusting food that made my stomach revolt. Once, she made me eat a sandwich stuffed with rotten meat, watching me choke and gag while she smiled, whispering, "This is what worthless people deserve." Each bite burned, and each swallow reminded me of how powerless I was. Vanessa began targeting my emotions more directly. She would tell me I had no friends, no future, no chance at happiness. "You are nothing," she said, "and the world will prove it every day. Don't even hope for love, because no one could ever care about you." I started to believe her, even as a small voice inside me refused to give in completely. She attacked my creativity and identity. My journals, which held my thoughts, my fears, my dreams, were ripped apart. My art, my sketches, my paintings, were shredded or destroyed. Once, she even poured water over an entire box of my belongings and left them to rot in the corner of the basement. I watched in silence, my heart breaking, my hands shaking, unable to do anything. Every piece of my childhood, every scrap of comfort I had, was being erased. School offered little escape. Rumors spread about me, some true, most false. Vanessa had convinced others I was manipulative, dishonest, unstable. Friends abandoned me. Teachers doubted me. I learned to sit silently in classrooms, pretending everything was fine, while my heart raced and my stomach twisted with fear. I became a ghost among people, unseen, unheard, entirely alone. Physical punishments were relentless. She would force me to stand in place for hours, sometimes barefoot on icy tiles, repeating her cruel phrases over and over. "You are nothing. You will never be enough." Some days she would slap or pinch me, but the mental scars were far worse. They lingered in my mind, replayed in every quiet moment, eroding confidence, instilling shame, and keeping me trapped in terror. Even at 16, I learned to endure unimaginable horrors while maintaining a calm exterior. I smiled, nodded, obeyed, and hid the growing storm of anger and determination within. Every insult, every deprivation, every act of psychological torture was transforming me, sharpening me, preparing me for a future I had to survive to see. I started documenting everything meticulously. Every cruel word, every act of punishment, every moment of humiliation, I recorded secretly. I catalogued my suffering, not to dwell on it, but to learn, to survive, and to plan. Each act of cruelty Vanessa inflicted was another brick in the foundation of the strength I was quietly building. By 17, I had transformed completely. The girl who had once sobbed uncontrollably in the basement was gone. In her place was a survivor, someone capable of enduring extreme cruelty, masking fear, observing silently, and planning patiently. Vanessa had no idea that every act of torment she believed had destroyed me was forging a version of me she could never control. Even as she continued to degrade me, humiliate me, and erase my identity, I felt a strange sense of power growing inside. Not yet visible, not yet acted upon, but growing. Every insult, every act of torment, every attempt to break me, had strengthened my mind, my patience, and my resolve. The Avery who trembled on the basement floor had been replaced with someone sharper, colder, and far more dangerous than Vanessa could ever imagine. By now, the basement had ceased to feel like a room, it had become a suffocating world of fear and despair. Vanessa's cruelty had reached a new, terrifying level. She no longer needed reason, no longer needed excuses. Every day was a fresh opportunity for her to invent new ways to break me completely. She would wake me in the middle of the night, dragging me upstairs just to remind me how powerless I was. Sometimes she would force me to kneel on the cold, hard floor while she paced in front of me, whispering words that tore at my very soul. "You are nothing. You are worthless. You will never be loved. Even your own father, if he were here, would regret you." I would curl into myself, shivering from fear and cold, but I learned early on that screaming only worsened things. So I stayed silent, swallowing my panic and terror like bitter pills. Vanessa began using my basic needs as weapons. She would withhold food for days, letting me watch as she ate with pleasure above the basement stairs. Sometimes she would serve me spoiled food, or force me to eat combinations designed to humiliate me. One evening, she presented a plate of rotting vegetables and rancid meat, and said, "This is all you're worthy of." I gagged, my stomach revolting, my body trembling, while she laughed above me, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Her manipulation extended beyond food or sleep. She systematically erased my sense of reality. She would insist that I had done things I hadn't, that I had said things I didn't remember, and that everyone hated me. "You are alone," she whispered repeatedly. "No one would ever defend you. You are nothing, and everyone knows it." At times, I began to question my own memory, my own thoughts. She had me doubting my very existence. She began taking my personal items one by one, my journals, my sketchbooks, my art supplies, destroying them, or locking them away. Once, she dumped a box of my drawings into the trash while I watched, saying, "Even your creativity is worthless." I stood frozen, tears streaming, rage and despair battling inside me. Every scrap of comfort, every memory, every fragment of my identity was under attack. At school, the isolation grew. Vanessa had spread lies about me to peers and teachers, portraying me as manipulative, dishonest, and unworthy. Friends stopped speaking to me. Teachers doubted my every word. I became invisible among people who were supposed to care, learning to mask my trembling hands, my racing heart, and my fear behind a calm, smiling face. No one saw the terror I carried, and that invisibility became my survival tool. Vanessa's attacks were no longer only verbal or physical, they were psychological masterpieces. She would twist every gesture, every expression I made, into a reason for punishment. If I looked confused, I was a liar. If I spoke, I was insolent. If I tried to defend myself, I was selfish and manipulative. She had created a world where everything I did was wrong, and every breath I took was evidence of my failure. Some nights, she would lock me in the basement without light, forcing me to stand silently for hours. She whispered threats that made my mind spin. "You will never be happy. You will never escape me. You are nothing." My legs ached, my back burned, My body shook, but I learned to endure. I endured because survival demanded it. I endured because deep inside, I had begun to cultivate a quiet, simmering determination, a plan for one day reclaiming my life. By 16, I had learned to endure everything Vanessa threw at me. I could smile while my body shook. I could nod while my heart screamed. I could obey while my mind secretly calculated every detail, every weakness, every chance I might get, every humiliation she inflicted, every deprivation she imposed, every shred of my dignity she destroyed, only strengthened me internally. I began documenting everything meticulously. Every cruel word, every punishment, every act of manipulation, I catalogued secretly. These records became my compass, a roadmap to survive and, eventually, to take control. Every tear I swallowed, every scream I withheld, every night of hunger and terror forged me into someone more patient, more calculated, and more determined than she could ever imagine. By 17, I was no longer the girl Vanessa believed she had broken. I had become a survivor, someone who could endure unimaginable cruelty, remain silent, observe every detail, and plan patiently. Each act of torment she inflicted had created a sharper, stronger, and far more dangerous version of me. Even as she continued to degrade me, humiliate me, and erase my identity, I felt a quiet power growing within me. Not yet visible, not yet acted upon, but undeniable. Every insult, every act of torment, every attempt to destroy me had only forged me into someone far stronger than she could ever imagine. The Avery, who had trembled on the basement floor, was gone, replaced by someone patient, cunning, and quietly unstoppable. By the time I was 18, the basement had ceased to feel like a room. It had become the entirety of my life, a constant battlefield where fear and cruelty were the only rules. Vanessa's abuse had reached levels I didn't know a human could survive. She didn't just control me anymore. She had begun to try to erase me entirely, as if I were nothing more than a shadow she could crush. Some mornings, I woke to find my personal belongings destroyed. My journals, my drawings, my few mementos from childhood, all shredded, burned, or scattered across the basement floor. Once, she forced me to sit in the remnants of my destroyed notebooks while she ate breakfast above me, laughing. "This is all you're worth," she said softly, almost tenderly, and yet the words were daggers. I remember gripping my knees, my teeth clenching, trying not to cry, trying not to break, but inside, a fire was slowly igniting. Sleep was torture. She would wake me at random hours, forcing me to clean, scrub, kneel, or stand in place for what felt like days. Sometimes, she would shout at me to recount every memory, every mistake, every thought I had that day. If I faltered, she would slap, pinch, or humiliate me in ways designed to crush my spirit. The mental and emotional anguish was relentless, more than I thought a person could bear. Food and water became instruments of control. Some days, she refused to feed me at all, leaving me weak and dizzy. Other days, she gave me spoiled food or disgusting combinations she called lessons. Once, she forced me to eat a moldy sandwich soaked in sour milk. I gagged, my stomach burned, but she smiled and said, "You think you deserve better. You don't." Every bite was a punishment, every swallow a reminder that my life was not my own. Vanessa's psychological manipulation was her most insidious weapon. She would make me doubt my own memory, my own sanity, my own existence. "No one will ever love you," she whispered repeatedly. "No one cares about you. You are a mistake, a waste, a burden." And yet, in those whispers, in that darkness, I began to hear another voice, small, quiet, stubborn, telling me that I would survive, that I would endure, that I would rise. The humiliation she inflicted extended beyond the basement. She would mock me at school, spread lies, tell teachers I was manipulative, untrustworthy, dangerous. Friends stopped talking to me. I became invisible, a ghost among people who should have cared. I learned to smile, to pretend, to hide the terror and despair. Every glance of suspicion, every whisper, every sidelong look was a reminder that the world could be just as cruel as Vanessa, and I had to be stronger. Her cruelty didn't just attack my mind, it attacked my identity. She would take my clothes, my shoes, my art supplies, and destroy them. She shaved my hair, tore apart my sketchbooks, ruined anything that gave me comfort. Once, she dumped all my belongings into a garbage bin in the yard and set it on fire, saying, "Your life is nothing. Your dreams are nothing. You are nothing." I felt rage and despair swirl together, yet I didn't scream. I had learned silence was survival. By 17, I had become something else entirely. I could endure unimaginable cruelty, remain calm, and observe every detail of Vanessa's behavior. I had catalogued every insult, every act of humiliation, every stolen possession, every psychological trick. I became invisible, quiet, patient, and calculating. Every time she thought she had destroyed me, I grew stronger, sharper, colder, more aware. And in that quiet patience, the fire inside me grew. Every humiliation, every act of control, every attempt to erase me became fuel for something far greater than survival, a plan. A determination that one day, I would reclaim my life. One day, Vanessa would face the weight of every act of cruelty she had inflicted. One day, every lie, every insult, every shred of torment she had poured over me would return to her in a way she could never escape. By the time I turned 18, the girl who had sobbed endlessly in the basement was gone. In her place was someone who had endured horrors beyond imagining, yet remained unbroken. Someone patient, observant, and quietly dangerous. Vanessa believed she had one. She had no idea that every act of cruelty, every word meant to destroy me, had only forged me into someone stronger, someone ready, someone unstoppable. The basement, the hunger, the humiliation, the isolation, the endless emotional torment they had created me, not broken me. And I knew, deep inside, that survival was no longer enough. I had learned to endure, to observe, to calculate, and to wait. Every day in that darkness, every night of fear, had prepared me. And one day, Vanessa would finally understand the true cost of the cruelty she had inflicted. Because the Avery she thought she had destroyed was no longer a girl to pity or control. She was someone she could never defeat. For years, Vanessa had believed she had one. She thought her control over Mitha, isolation, the humiliation, the constant torment had broken every part of me. She had no idea that everything she had done, every cruel word, every act of abuse, had not destroyed me. It had forged me. It had sharpened me. And now, at 18, I was ready. I had spent years documenting everything, every insult, every stolen possession, every act of cruelty. Every lie she had told about me, every detail was recorded, saved, and memorized. And now, with the evidence in hand, I finally had the power she had tried to steal from me. It started quietly. I contacted authorities, showed them the records, the videos, the photos. Every cruel act she had inflicted was laid bare, undeniable. CPS investigated, teachers and friends confirmed her lies and manipulation, and the entire web of control she had woven began to unravel. Vanessa was shocked, completely unprepared for the world outside the basement walls to see her for who she really was. The court process was intense. She tried to deny, to manipulate, to charm, but the truth was clear. For the first time in her life, she had to face the consequences. Her reputation, carefully curated over years, collapsed as her lies and abuses were exposed, and the basement, once her throne of control, became a symbol of her defeat. Vanessa was ordered to therapy, community service, and restrictions from contacting me. Legally, she faced fines and accountability. And for the first time, the law recognized the full extent of her abuse. Emotionally, socially, publicly, she was humiliated. The power she had wielded for so long was gone. And me. I finally stepped out of that basement, into sunlight, into freedom. The girl who had once cried endlessly in the shadows was gone. In her place was someone who had endured unimaginable cruelty and emerged stronger, wiser, and fully aware of her own value. I didn't need to shout, didn't need revenge in anger. Justice had been served. The law, the truth, and my own strength had been enough. I started rebuilding my life, school, friends, even small joys that Vanessa had tried to take from me, embraced them fully. Every smile, every laugh, every day outside the basement walls was a small act of victory. I had survived what most people could not imagine, and I had reclaimed my identity, my dignity, and my future. Vanessa's shadow remained, of course, but it no longer loomed over me. The fear, the humiliation, the manipulation, they were all behind me now. Every act of cruelty she had committed became proof, not of my weakness, but of my strength. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without fear, walk without trembling, speak without shame. I had endured the worst, survived, and emerged victorious not by cruelty, not by anger, but by patience, intelligence, and unwavering determination. Avery had survived. Avery had won. And justice, long delayed, had finally been served.